The sun did not set over the kingdom of Akore. It bled. In the heart of the city sat the palace of bronze, a structure so magnificent. It was said the gods themselves had tilted the earth just to admire it. But inside, the air was heavy with the smell of burnt palm oil and fear. King Jide, the 10th Oba of Akore, sat upon his throne, made of the bleached bones of his rivals. He was a man whose shadow seemed longer than his body, a man who had forgotten the taste of mercy. On this night, the great hall was filled with the sound of hollow laughter. Jide was celebrating his 10th year of rule, and the wine flowed like the blood of the innocent. At the far end of the hall stood Nneka, a woman of grace and silver-threaded hair, and beside her, her son, Kofi. They were not guests, they were the evening's entertainment. They say, the Oba began, his voice like the grinding of stones, that your son is the fastest hunter in the 7 hills.
They say he can catch a gazelle before it knows it is being chased.
Kofi stepped forward, his eyes burning. I do not hunt for sport, Oba. I hunt to feed my mom and the elders of my village. The Oba's smile did not reach his eyes, a noble entitlement. But Akore has enough hunters. What Akore lacks is a miracle. I have a dream, Kofi, a dream of a garden decorated not with flowers, but with the eternal wood of the forbidden grove.
I want the head of Mami Nara, the Serpent Queen.
A silence fell over the hall, so thick it could be felt in the lungs. The music stopped. Even the crickets outside seemed to hold their breath. Mami Nara was a name used to frighten children into staying in their beds. She was the woman with the hair of mambas, whose gaze turned flesh into ebony wood. If you bring me her head, the Oba continued, leaning forward, your mother shall be given a palace of her own. She will eat from the plates of gold until the end of her days. But, he paused, his voice dropping to a whisper, if you refuse or if you fail to return by the next new moon, she will be cast into the pit of vipers to pay for your cowardice. Nneka grabbed Kofi's arm, her fingers trembling. Do not go, my son. It is a death sentence. But Kofi looked at his mother's tired face, at the callousness on her hands from the years of laboring for the king's taxes. He looked at the Oba's mocking grin. He realized that in Akore, you were either the hammer or the anvil. He chose to be the hammer.
I will bring you the head.
His voice echoing off the bronze walls. The Oba laughed, a dry rattling sound. Then go, start your journey tonight. As Kofi turned to leave, the Oba signaled to his captain of the guard, a man named Zel with a scar across his throat. Zel leaned in close. He must not reach the grove, the Oba whispered, and he must certainly never return. Take the red guard, follow him. Once he's deep enough in the forest that the gods cannot see him, finish him. I want his mother to watch the horizon for his son, who is already food for the vultures. Kofi walked out of the palace, unaware that the king had not set him on a quest, but on an execution. He walked towards the smoking hills where the great diviner lived, carrying nothing but a small knife and a heart full of fire. The stars above were cold and distant like the eyes of the king. Little did Kofi know the path he had chosen would lead him not just to a monster, but to the very truth of why the world had become so dark. Deep in the shadows of the palace gates, 6 figures in red cloaks slipped into the night. They moved like smoke, their blades blackened, so they would not catch the moonlight. The hunt had begun, and for the first time in his life, Kofi was not the hunter. He was the prey. The moon was a silver of bone in the sky, choked by charcoal clouds, as Kofi crossed the threshold of the city. Behind him, the torches of the Akore flickered like dying embers. Before him lay the ironwood forest, a place where the trees grew so dense and the bark so hard that even the hardest axe will recoil with its scream of sparks. Kofi traveled light. He carried a hunting spear tipped with obsidian, a small god of water, and a heart heavy with the image of his weeping mother. He knew the path to the smoking hill was treacherous, But he did not yet know that the greatest danger was not the leopards or the spirits of the wood. It was the man who shed his blood. 3 miles into the forest, the air changed. The familiar scent of jasmine and wood smoke was replaced by a cloying metallic smell, the scent of wet iron. Kofi stopped. His ears, trained by the years of tracking small game, picked up a sound that didn't belong. It wasn't the rustle of a rodent or the sway of a branch. It was the rhythmic clink clank of metal against the leather. Armor. Kofi didn't turn around. To turn was to admit he was prey. Instead, he dived into the shadow of a sprawling baobab tree, just as the black feathered arrow hissed through the space
Out
where
of the
his soul had been a
shadows,
second
little
before.
rabbit.
The voice boomed. It was Zale, the captain of the Red Guard. 5 men emerged from the undergrowth. They wore crimson tunics and leather chest pieces, their faces painted with the white ash of the dead. These were the Oba's elite, men who had forgotten the meaning of a fair fight. The Oba is a generous man, Kofi, Zale said. Unsheathed a curved corpse sword that gleamed like a snake's tooth. He didn't want you to die in the groove. He sent us to give you a quicker end. Consider it mercy. Kofi gripped his spear, his knuckles white. The Oba is a coward who hides behind the walls and assassins. If you want my life, Zale, come and take it. But know that my mother's tears have made me into something you cannot kill. The Red God moved with terrifying coordination. 2 circled to the left, 2 to the right, while Zale held the center. Kofi was a skilled hunter, but he was one boy against 5 chained killers. He launched at the nearest guard using the length of his spear to keep them at bay, but the terrain was against him. The roots of the ironwood tree seemed to reach up to trip him, sleek with the evening's dew. The fight was a blur of steel and sweat. Kofi managed to wound one guard in the thigh, but a heavy blow from his shield caught him in the ribs, sending him sprawling into the dirt. Gasping for air, he saw Zale standing over him, the sword raised for the final strike. A brave effort, Zale sneered, but bravery is just a fancy word for those too stupid to run. But as Zale swung, Kofi didn't flinch. He reached into the dirt and threw a handful of stinged pepperwood powder, a hunter's trick, directly into Zale's eyes. The captain roared in pain, his sword swinging widely and missing Kofi's head by an inch. Kofi scrambled away, disappearing into a thicket of thorns. He was bleeding from a cut on his shoulder, but his ribs felt like they were on fire. But he was alive. However, the Oba's trap was deeper than just 5 men with swords. As Kofi ran, he felt a sudden unnatural coldness seize his ankles. He looked down and gasped. From the shadows of the trees, dark and shrill chains were coiling around his legs. These were not made of iron. They were made of juju, the dark magic of the Oba's court sorcerers. You think you can run from a king? Zale's voice drifted through the forest, muffled as he wiped the stings from his eyes. The Oba gave me a shadow slinker. Wherever your shadow touches, the earth will claim you. You belong to the king, boy, body and soul. The black chain tightened, pulled Kofi towards the ground. He hacked at them with the obsidian spear, but the blade passed through the shadows as if they were smoke. The more he struggled, the tighter they became. He was being dragged backward toward the Red God, towards his execution. Kofi lay on the forest floor, his face pressed into the rotting leaves. He could hear the heavy boots of the Red God approaching. He thought of Nneka. He thought of her being forced into the Oba's harem, waiting for his son who would never come. He felt a wave of cold hopelessness wash over him. I am nothing, he thought. Just a boy playing at being a hero. The chains were now at his waist, dragging him towards a deep, jagged ravine. Zale appeared at the edge of the clearing, his face twisted in a mask of rage. No more games, Zale shouted. Throw him into the gorge. Let the vultures have what is left. Just as the guards reached out to grab him, Kofi's hand brushed against something hard beneath the leaves, a fallen branch of the ironwood tree, scorched by a previous lightning strike. In African folklore, wood struck by lightning carries the breath of Shango, the god of thunder. Kofi didn't think, he acted on instinct. He grabbed the charred wood and slammed it into the shadow chains at his feet. A crack of static electricity hissed through the air. The lightning touched wood, acted as a conductor, shattering the dark magic of the shadow snares. The chains dissolved into black mist with a sound like a dying scream. Kofi didn't wait. With the speed of a startled leper, he used the momentum of his release to sprint towards the raven. "He's jumping!" one of the guards yelled. "Let him!" Zale spat. It's 100-foot drop to the jagged rocks. No one survives the devil's shot. Kofi hit the edge of the cliff and leaped into darkness. He felt the rushing wind, the branches of smaller trees crawling at his skin as he fell. He crashed through a canopy of vines that slowed his descent before slamming into a shell of soft mud and mud near the bottom. Everything went black. Hours later, the moon had moved across the sky. Kofi opened his eyes to find himself at the bottom of the ravine. He was covered in bruises. His spear was now in half and the water god was gone. He was lost in the deepest part of the forest, haunted by the king's men and weakened by dark magic. But as he looked up, he saw the distant, glowing peaks of the smoking hills. They were far, miles away from the territory no sane man would tread. He stood up, his legs shaking, and tied the broken tip of his obsidian spear to a sturdy branch with a strip of his tunic. The Oba had tried to kill him twice in one night. He had sent steel and he had sent shadows, and yet Kofi still breathed. "You should have made sure I was dead, Zale," Kofi whispered into the night, "because now I am not hunting for a queen, I am hunting for justice." With blood on his brow and fire in his heart, Kofi turned away from the kingdom and began the long, agonizing climb towards the smoking hill. The real magic was about to begin. The climb of the Devil's Throat was not a journey of miles, but a journey of inches. Kofi's fingernails were torn, his muscles screamed in protest, and the humidity of the lowlands pressed down on him like a wet shroud. But as he crested the final ridge, the air changed. It became thin, sharp, and carried the pungent, biting scent of sulfur and ancient fire. Before him rose the smoking hills. They were not mountains of earth and tree, but jagged teeth of obsidian and basalt that seemed to gnaw at the very sky. Plumes of thick grey vapor drifted from hidden vents in the ground, the breath of the ancestors, the legends called it. No bird sang here. The only sound was the low rhythmic thrumming of the earth, like a giant heart beating deep beneath the rock. Kofi's destination was the highest peak, a jagged spire known as the Cloud Cutter. There in the cave, lined with the bones of forgotten kings, lived the Whisperer, the great diviner who had seen the birth of the kingdom and would likely see its fall. As Kofi neared the summit, the heat became almost unbearable. The soles of his sandals began to sting. Just as he felt his knees buckle, a voice echoed from the mist, a voice that sounded like dry leaves skittering over stone. "You have the scent of the Oba's palace on you, boy. It smells of rot and ego. Why should I not let the sulfur take your lungs?" Kofi looked up. Standing atop a flat projection of rock was a figure that seemed more spirit than man. He was impossibly thin. His skin, the color of parched clay and etched with the thousands of ritual scars that glowed faintly in the dim light. Around his neck hung a string of eyes, not humans, but carved from tiger's eye gemstones. And his hair was a wild crown of white wool. This was the hermit of the smoking hills. "I do not come for the Oba," Kofi gasped, falling to his shadows. "I come for my mother and for the head of the Serpent Queen." The hermit laughed, a sound cracking glass. "The queen? Many have come for her head. Their bodies now decorate the cave like furniture. They come with iron and swords and golden armor. They come with pride and they all turn to wood. What do you bring, little hunter?" Kofi held up his broken spear, its obsidian tip jagged and stained with the blood of the red guard. "I bring a debt that must be paid and the will to survive a king's betrayal." The hermit's milky eyes narrowed. He stepped closer and for a moment, Kofi felt as if his very soul was being weighed on a scale. "Betrayal, you say?" "Yes. The Oba's shadows grows long. It has reached even these heights." The old man turned and gestured towards the mouth of a dark steaming cavern. "Follow, but know this. The magic you seek is not a weapon. It is a burden. Many men can carry a sword. Few can carry the truth." Inside the cave, the walls were covered in shifting shadows that seemed to dance without a light source. In the center sat a heavy wooden tray filled with white dust and cowrie shell. The hermit began to chant a low, guttural vibration that made the very air in the cave shimmer. He chewed the shells and they landed in a pattern that made the old man hiss. The Serpent Queen was once a daughter of this land, the hermit whispered, a priestess of Oshun who kept the waters pure. It was the king's lineage, the first king of Akore, who coveted her power and stole her sanctity. He caused her so she would be a monster, a guardian to keep people away from the truths hidden in the forbidden grove. You are not just hunting a monster, Kofi, you are hunting the Oba's greatest sin. The hermit reached into a stone chest and pulled out 3 items, each wrapped in a cloth made of woven spider silk. To defeat the curse, you must use the tools of the gods, the hermit said, his voice grave. First, he uncovered a shield of polished bronze, so bright it seemed to emit its own light, the mirror of Oshun. It does not show the world as it is, but as the spirit it tends. You must never look at the queen directly, for her curse travels through the eyes of the beholder. Look only at the reflection, but beware, the mirror will also show you your own darkest fear. If you flinch at your own shadow, you will turn to wood before you even strike. Second, he produced a pair of iron anklets adorned with the feathers of a blue kingfisher, the anklets of the lightning bird. They will grant you the speed of the storm. You will move faster than the strike of a mamba, but you draw their power from your own life force. Use them too long and your heart will burst. Finally, he held up a cloak made from the hide of a black leopard, so dark it seemed to absorb the light around it. The cloak of the night stalker. It will make you invisible to the eyes of men and monsters alike. But while you wear it, you are a ghost. You will forget who you are while you wear the cloak. You will fade away and never return to the world of the living. Kofi reached out to take the items, but the hermit pulled them back. There is a price, Kofi. Magic is never free. To carry these items, you must leave something behind. You must give me your most precious memory, a memory that keeps you human. If you succeed, you may find a new life. If you fail, you will die without even knowing your own name. Kofi felt a cold knot of dread in his stomach. His most precious memory was the sound of his mother singing to him when he was a child, a song of the harvest, of peace, of a time before the Oba taxes and the red god's blades. It was the memory that gave him strength when he was tired. If I give it to you, Kofi asked, his voice trembling, will I still love her? The heart remembers what the mind forgets, the hermit said, but the path will be lonelier. Kofi looked at the smoking hill, then back towards the direction of Akore. He thought of Nneka in the palace, her life hanging by a thread. He reached out his hand. Take it. If my memory is the price for her life, I pay it gladly. The hermit touched Kofi's forehead. For a second, a bright flash of golden light filled the cave, and Kofi felt a sudden hollow ache in his chest, a space where his song used to be. He could remember his mother's face, he could remember his mission, but the feeling of that lullaby, the warmth of that specific peace was gone. He was now a vessel of vengeance and magic. Go now, the hermit commanded, handing him the mirror, the anklet, and the cloak. The forbidden grove lies to the east, but do not think the Oba has given up. He has a third trap waiting for you at the river's edge, a trap not of steel, but of the heart. Do not trust the water, Kofi. The water remembers what the land tries to forget. Kofi stepped out of the cave, the bronze shield strapped to his back. He felt lighter, faster, but also colder. As he began his descent towards the east, the anklets of the lightning bird began to hum against his skin. Sensing the storm of the journey ahead, he was no longer the boy who had fallen into the devil's throat. He was the shadow of Akore, and the Serpent Queen was waiting.